Peak Wealth Management proudly presents Finding True Wealth with certified financial planner Nick Hopwood and accredited investment fiduciary Jim Pilat. Nick and Jim believe by making simple, good financial decisions, you can retire with confidence. And now, let's turn it over to your hosts, Nick and Jim.
Welcome everyone to episode 99 of the Retire with Confidence podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Jim.
And today we're going to be talking about Mr. Wonderful.
Yeah, from Shark Tank fame, right?
Yes.
Kevin O'Leary.
Kevin, yes. So why do they call him Mr. Wonderful? Because he's a jerk, right? Isn't that
I think it's a self-given nickname.
Okay.
I think he did it to himself.
Okay. So he's self-aware.
Yeah.
I like people like that.
Right.
So you found this article online recently,
Mm-hmm.
and Mr. Wonderful was quoted saying what?
He said everybody should be debt-free by age 45.
Or maybe have aspirations.
Yeah, or make it a goal, right? You should have a goal of being debt-free by age 45. Yeah.
Sounds great. Let's go. Cut it.
Yeah.
So who said what about that?
Well, you know, they every story, right? They have a counter side to it. And there was another advisor or company came out and said, well, that may not be your best bet or may be unrealistic. Right.
I can understand that it might be unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many people do you know that are debt free at 45?
There's not many. We definitely don't see many coming through the doors here, right?
That's a good place for a tease for next week's episode. You can find out next week, episode 100.
Right. There we go. I like it.
But debt free at 45, we don't really see that much.
We don't see it much. You know, we live in a world that really has embraced debt, right? Whether it be from maybe a bigger mortgage than you can really afford, whether it be student loan debt that you took on to try to get the degree you wanted at the school you wanted, right? Whether it even be credit card debt. I mean, we see a fair amount of people come through with credit card debt, you know, because you want to furnish the house that you just, you know, you kind of overspent on, right? Or you want to take the trip, right? You want
Drapes
to do
are
these
expensive,
things.
man.
Landscaping.
Drapes.
Oh, the furniture.
Patio.
I mean, you name it.
Furniture, paint.
We've talked about these.
Repaint.
You can't have that painter's paint on there, right? The builder's paint, right?
I know that Patty was on a couple weeks ago on Lifestyle Creep. She repainted. Yep. But she painted herself.
She did it herself, yeah.
So that, you know, cuts down on the cost.
Absolutely.
So debt free at 45. You know, if you're 30 years old, right, it means that you are getting a 15-year mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's reasonable as long as you don't trade up too aggressively on the house.
Right. You're either getting a 15-year mortgage or you're taking the 30-year and being intentional about paying additional.
Either
right?
way's fine.
That could be the alternative to that, is saying, I'm gonna make sure we allocate additional dollars towards that principal repayment.
And if you're graduating college 21, 22, right, that's a 20-year student loan repayment plan. That's reasonable.
Yeah, that would seem
What's wrong with that?
reasonable, yeah.
Okay. Credit cards, right, that's behavioral modification. If you have the credit cards, then you got to fix the behavior, right, and then pay it back.
Right.
But why, hey, the way that we laid that out, why can't we be debt free at 45? Why do we have almost everyone trying to retire with a 30-year mortgage?
Yeah.
Right, it's a problem.
Yeah, I think so, and I really think people it's the society, right? You got to have the bigger place. You got to upgrade. You can't stay in the same place forever. You got to lifestyle creep, right? It's all those things. Yeah.
It comes back to the creeper again.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be too hard. But like, I reflect on myself, right? I do have debt. I don't like it, but I have debt because I made investments, right? So that's how I tell myself that it's okay.
Yeah, I think there's different kinds of
We
debt.
pay off the house, then get a big home equity line, and we go buy rental properties. We've discussed it at length on all these podcasts.
Right.
And so because we are aggressive purchasing some of these properties, now I'm aggressive paying it back, right? Paying it off. So I'm 41, and actually, you know what? This resonates because I've outlined what kind of payments would I need to make in order to make it a 45 payoff. So that's why Mr. Wonderful's comments hit me. They struck a chord with me because I made those calculations and I'm making those payments, and I'm gonna get there. Now, when I get there, I can just see it off in the horizon. Something's gonna come up, something will change,
Yeah.
in the world, in what's available, investment ideas or whatever, and we'll go do something else and use that home equity line again, and then I'll have something new to pay off.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can just see it.
But like you said, so I think the book was Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? Where they talk about using debt or using your money to further your net worth, right? And every time you make a purchase, I like that they planted this thought in my head. But every time you make a purchase or you spend some money or take on debt, right? Is it furthering your net worth or is it hampering your net worth? And I think that's a good visual, right? So in your example, you took on debt, but ultimately it will further your net worth, right? As opposed to taking on a debt to buy the bigger boat, right? Or to buy the nicer car or whatever.
Yeah, the boat purchase is going to be a depreciation. The vehicle is going to be depreciation. The rental property, right, should hold its value, and it should, give you rental income ROI.
For sure.
The cottage situation, actually, it should hold its value, but that's a major setback.
Right.
Okay? I mean, next week we're going to talk about the 2021 personal financial plan. Well, looking back on 2020, right, there is a new boat involved. We bought used, okay, and it wasn't too bad, but that wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for that cottage purchase, which did create a little bit of debt.
Yeah, but I think that it's every purchase you make doesn't have to be furthering your net worth, right? I mean, while that should be a goal and a good idea, it's okay to enjoy life, right? I think there's that's important as well, right? For people to realize you can spend money to enjoy life, but it's understanding that threshold, right? And where the appropriate amount is.
Now, here's a lesson, right? In Econ 101, there's a term that they use called utility. And I'm like, what is utility? Like, what are they talking about? It means happiness, okay?
Yeah.
So there's it's even in Econ 101, happiness.
Right.
So you're right. It's not just about furthering your net worth at every step. We want to have some happiness, and the cottage does provide that.
Right.
But okay, so go back to the Elvest comments on Mr. Wonderful. Why would it be a boneheaded move to aggressively pay off? I don't get it.
Yeah, and I think the thing that pops up more times than not when people talk about the debt versus savings comment is, well, what if interest rates are low? I can make more money in the stock market than I can, than I'm paying an interest on the debt. So I should keep the debt around forever, right? So that I can make more money in the market. I think that's a thought it's an argument, I'll say, that a lot of people have. But in my mind, I think it doesn't fully take into consideration the risk that's associated with debt, right? I mean, coming through what we just came through, right, earlier in February and March, right, a lot of people lost jobs, right? And of course, there's some government programs and things that they put in place to help people who had debt to be able to procrastinate or put off those payments, right? But ideally, I don't think you want to be in a position where you have to rely on, the help of the government or somebody to help you not make payments, right? If you're in a situation where you have too much debt and in the moment you lose a job or you miss a paycheck, you're now in trouble, right? Because those debt payments don't stop. That's, in my mind, that's risk with associated in taking on too much debt.
No one will ever convince me that you should go into debt just because. Okay.
Right.
It's a tool, and that's that.
Yeah.
I believe, with markets correcting every year, 10% per year every year, a bear market every few years, and a major event at least every 10 years. In my career, right, we had the market down 50+% with the tech crash, 50+% with the housing financial crisis, the Great Recession, and then with COVID, 35% drop. Okay. Now look, it's always come back and it's always been okay. But when you let's imagine, and this would be unethical for us to recommend. I'm not recommending this. Let's just pretend you take out a home equity line for $100,000 and you invest it on January 1st of this year, right? So your payment maybe is like $500 a month or something like that with a principal and interest. And then on March 23rd, your portfolio that you started with 100,000 is worth like 70,000, right? Maybe less, depending on what you were investing in.
Yeah.
So now you have 70,000 and you owe like 99,000.
Right.
How's that working out for you?
It doesn't feel good, does it?
Right. Now, on that day, you're thinking that you made a terrible mistake, right? And I think it is a mistake to think like this. But now, you know, the 70,000's come back, and maybe you have 110,000. I don't know, but you're feeling better. But you know, you might have made a behavioral choice between January 1st and now, where in March you couldn't handle the heat,
Right.
and so you pushed the button. What I mean by pushing the button is to sell.
Sell at the worst time.
And now your 70,000 is still today worth 70,000, and you owe 100.
Yeah.
Right? That's just, look, you like to say, hey, I'm going to average 9% and my interest rate's only 4, or maybe less. But what happens day in and day out is usually a different story.
Yeah, and I think you gave a great analogy, right? Because while people have debt and a mortgage, they can rationalize, well, maybe I should just put more towards savings rather than pay down the debt, right? You can do that. But if you paint the picture a little bit different and say you have no debt, but would you take out a loan to invest? I've not yet found anybody who will say, yeah, I'll do that, right? But it's really no different, right? Than if you are carrying the debt. So
right.
I think that it's a good analogy to think of it like that.
Yeah. So the other argument that she makes is, well, Mr. Wonderful says, hey, if you put all your money towards debt to aggressively pay off, then between age 45 and 65, you're in prime earnings years, and then you can build your portfolio, right?
Right.
Now, my view would be to focus on both, right, all throughout. And I think your philosophy for yourself that we're going to talk about in episode 100 coming up next is to front load, right, portfolio stuff.
Yeah.
But not ignoring the debt, right? We want to focus on both,
right,
all the time. Okay?
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know if he was intentionally saying you don't grow your portfolio at all and you only pay off. I doubt that. The guy seems pretty smart.
Yeah. He didn't specifically comment on that, but I think that the goal really, he was just saying be intentional about getting the debt gone by this
which
age.
I think is great.
Yeah.
Now the lady from Elvest, is talking about how men have their peak earnings at age 55, and women have peak earnings. Is it later?
Yeah.
That's later. Okay. So do we take into consideration peak earnings with our estimated debt payoff plan? I mean, for me, it's kind of speculative, right? I can say that I'm going to make more, that I'm going to be making a lot more in the future, but for our financial planning purposes, I'd rather just use a linear COLA, cost of living adjustment, and be conservative about my earnings expectations.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, because in a perfect world, right, you can make decisions in a perfect world that seem reasonable, right? And one of them being what we're talking about, right, is hanging on to debt at a lower rate so that you can hope to make more in the market, right? In a perfect world, maybe that makes sense, but it doesn't take into account the variables that come up undoubtedly all the time, right? It's the same with that, right? You can't just assume without question you'll be making more money 5, 10, 15 years from now. You just don't know.
Okay, well, if you would like to get a second opinion on whether or not you should be making extra debt payments or extra investments each month, give us a call. Where can they reach us for a second opinion, Jim?
peakwm.com is a great place to start. You can book online.
Book online.
Yeah.
And next up, let's see, what's next? Oh, I teased it like 3 times already.
Yeah, the financial plan.
Next up is Jim and Emily Pilat's 2021 financial plan. Stay tuned.
You've been listening to certified financial planner Nick Hopwood and accredited investment fiduciary Jim Pilat on the Finding True Wealth podcast, sponsored by Peak Wealth Management. You can learn more about Peak Wealth Management by visiting peakwm.com or follow on Twitter at nhopwood1.